I want to talk to you this morning about another feeling, an uncomfortable feeling. And I witnessed this firsthand about 2 months ago on a flight to Dallas. My seatmate was obviously having some kind of problem because one of his feet just kept on moving. And apparently he couldn't get relief because after moving it for a minute or two, sitting right next to me, he began to bang it on the floor of the aircraft. I thought, wow, he's really going through something here. I wonder what it is. And that wasn't enough relief, so he pulled a ballpoint pen out of his bag and began shoving it down into his shoe repeatedly. I'm putting the pieces together now because I've had this experience, and I'm thinking, he's got an itch. And apparently this itch would not go away because before I knew it, he was taking his shoe off and then his sock off and furiously scratching his foot right there next to me on the airplane. I want to explore with you this morning, or whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world as you're joining us for this Storyline live stream, I want to explore with you what I'm going to refer to as the existential itch. Now, first we need a basic definition. What is an itch? Well, we all know what it is. We've experienced it. An itch is an uncomfortable feeling on the skin that demands relief by some form of touch, preferably scratching. We've all had an itch we couldn't even reach and have to go find some kind of physical object to lean on in order to find relief. Now, imagine something even more weird, something truly bizarre. Imagine feeling an itch on an appendage that isn't even there. This is called in the medical community a phantom itch. This is when an individual has undergone some kind of amputation of an arm or a foot or a leg or whatever, and yet persistently they are experiencing the itch and the impulse to scratch the itch on that arm, that leg that's not even there. Talk about a maddening experience. Well, in the history of ideas coming down to us through time, human beings have grappled with a different kind of itch, a deeper sense of desire for a deeper sense of relief. Beginning with Soren Kierkegaard, we have the beginnings of what is known to philosophy and history as existentialism, from the word existence. This is the idea that human experience is observed for what it is, with no empirical data being imposed upon the human interpretation or the interpretation of the human experience. Existentialism just looks at the human being and says, okay, what's going on there in this organism? What's going on in this psychology? What's going on in this person? What defines their existence? Hence the word existentialism. Now, Kierkegaard was interesting because he was, before a philosopher, he was, in fact, a theologian. In fact, he claims to have derived all of his observations regarding human nature from looking at human nature through the lens of Genesis chapters 1 through 3. He was a theologian, and as a theologian, he was extremely observant of the human experience, human existence. The Russian novelist Dostoevsky was another existentialist who came along and through his novels began to probe what it means to be a human being on the deepest possible level, probing the thinking and feeling and relational patterns of human beings, and then observing in his novels, in the intersection of the characters, what it means to be human. Now, both of these individuals in the existential tradition were believers in the existence of God, and both of them traced the existential itch to a longing for God on a level of transcendent meaning. But after these two individuals comes Jean-Paul Sartre, the French philosopher, and he came along and he said, actually, this desire, this impulse, this existential itch it's traceable to nothing. Life has no significance whatsoever. And the French philosopher Albert Camus comes along and in the tradition of Sartre says, exactly, the way we feel, the way we think, the way we are reaching out constantly of ourselves, feeling as for something, turns out we're feeling for nothing because nothing's there. It's an illusion. Meaning is an illusion. Significance is an illusion. The itch can't be scratched. It's a phantom itch. The appendage isn't there to scratch. There is no relief. We're just going to have to face the brutal reality that life has no meaning. So existentialism essentially says that every human being faced with the brutal realities of life is going to go in one of two directions. This is true of you, it's true of me. There are no exceptions. Existentialism says that you will, as you are faced with life itself, the scary things of life, the fear of death and mortality, all the things that pounce upon us as human beings, interpersonal conflict, divorce, everything, a virus, a microorganism that takes on the human race. Whatever it is we're faced with, the human mind is going to reach in one of two directions. We're either going to reach in the direction that life is meaningful, significant, it is possessed with meaning, it is full of meaning. There's something to this, there's something to us. Or the other option is to conclude that life is meaningless. It doesn't have any significance whatsoever. One of the most popular books on the planet right now is *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari. The book is on multiple bestseller lists. It has been translated into multiple languages. It is selling so fast that the publisher can't keep up. Over and over again, let's go back to print, let's go back to print. People are devouring this book. Chapter 1 of *Sapiens*, which is, by the way, subtitled A Brief History of Humankind, the first chapter of the book bears the ominous title, An Animal of No Significance. Now, if you're thinking, well, that language in the first chapter must be referring to human beings because this book, in fact, is a brief history of humankind, you would be correct. The first chapter of the book, right out of the gate, comes along and says, listen, by the way, just so we know, in chapter 1, what we're going to discover is that human beings are animals of no significance. In chapter 1, Harari says this to us, the most important thing to know. Not one of the things to know, but the most important thing to know about prehistoric humans is that they were insignificant. They were insignificant animals with no more impact on their environment than gorillas, fireflies, and jellyfish. This is one of the best-selling books on the planet right now. It is well written. It is fascinating. It is completely vacant of existential meaning. The book goes on chapter by chapter by chapter, basically attempting to persuade us that if life is going to have any meaning at all, then we're going to have to construct that meaning out of nothing, because there is no actual, transcendent, empirical meaning that is above and beyond what we're experiencing right here, right now as human beings. So you read through the whole book, you come to the last chapter, well, actually, the afterword, which is after the last chapter, and the afterword bears the title, The Animal That Became God. And of course, the first chapter, an animal of no significance whatsoever, the last chapter is saying, well, this animal that is of no significance is now elevating and evolving to the point where human beings may be able to actualize some kind of significance, some kind of meaning, and impose that constructed meaning on reality because there isn't any there, but human beings now have risen to the place where they are now gods in their own right. What are they going to do with it? And here's the last sentence of the best-selling book, the last sentence of the book, and it is chilling, to say the least. Is there anything more dangerous than dissatisfied and irresponsible gods who don't know what they want? Let me read that sentence again for clarity. Is there anything more dangerous than dissatisfied and irresponsible gods who don't know what they want? Well, it's a rhetorical question. The book closes with the question. The question is intended to basically freak us out and make us have a sense that, hey, wait a minute, human beings, through the evolutionary process, have now come to the place where they can literally do anything. But they don't know what they want. And because we don't know what we want, because we don't know what kind of meaning to invest reality with, because in fact, we have come to the conclusion that it has no meaning, because we don't know what life is for, well, good night. We're on dangerous ground. We're in a situation because we are both dissatisfied. We long for something, the illusion of meaning. We're dissatisfied, but our dissatisfaction is coupled, and this is a bad marriage, coupled with irresponsibility. I mean, what will we do with all this power that we are wielding as highly evolved human beings? That's the question the book ends with. Sapiens, one of the best-selling books on the planet right now, is simply logically working out the secular branch of existentialism. Now, you remember I said that there are two branches. Existentialism began with theological minds. Those who were thinking, hey, life does have meaning, and the existential itch, the angst that we feel in our souls is traceable to something, to someone transcendent. But the other branch of existentialism comes along and says, you know that itch you have? It's a phantom itch. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. Well, interestingly enough, Tom Bethel comes along and he says, it is an article of our secular faith. He himself, by the way, was a believer in the existence of a transcendent God who gives transcendent meaning to life. But he is articulating here the sense that is present in secular existentialism. It is an article of our secular faith that there is nothing exceptional about human life. Nothing exceptional. It doesn't mean anything. It is of no higher quality or significance than a firefly or a jellyfish, for crying out loud. Now, the most popular atheists of the 1900s, not the early 1900s, but the 1980s and 90s, was Stephen Jay Gould from Harvard University. And this guy, he came along and he said, listen. Here we are trying to keep hold of some sense of meaning with religion, for example, and we're not taking seriously what we've discovered in science, i.e., evolutionary biology. He was, in fact, an evolutionary biologist. And he comes along and he says, listen, let's just cut through all of the illusion and let's just tell the truth of the matter. We are here, human beings on this planet, we are here because one odd group of fishes had a peculiar fin anatomy that could transform into legs for terrestrial or earthly creatures. That's why we're here, he says. We're here because comets struck the earth and wiped out dinosaurs, thereby giving mammals a chance not otherwise available. In other words, the dinosaurs would have eaten up all the sapiens if, in fact, they would have survived. We're here because the earth never froze entirely during the Ice Age. There was warmth somewhere that could be migrated to. We're here because the earth never froze completely in an Ice Age. And then he says this, we're here because a small and tenuous species arising in Africa 250,000 years ago has managed so far to survive by hook and by crook. That's why we're here as human beings. And then this final line, we may yearn, and in fact we do, we may yearn for a higher answer, but none exists. No. We just need to face the music. We need to face reality. We need to own up to the existential horror of our existence. Life has no meaning whatsoever. We may long for, yearn for, wish for life to have some kind of significance, but it doesn't, Gould tells us. Now, currently, Richard Dawkins, of course, is the most articulate atheist on the planet, and he is putting forth the secular stream of the existential philosophy with very, very high levels of clarity in his writings. And it's a level of clarity that even those who subscribe to his worldview wish he would kind of keep hush-hush, because when he just comes right out and says exactly what it means, it just seems too absolutely horrific to take on board. But he's unabashed. Richard Dawkins says, with respect to those meanings, note the word meanings of human, that are relevant to the morality of abortion, any fetus is less human than an adult pig. Okay, he's not insulting the human race. He's just talking like a evolutionary biologist. He's just saying, listen, there is no fundamental difference in meaning between a human fetus and an adult pig. He goes on, it gets worse. What about infanticide? That is the killing of children out of the womb. Abortion being the killing of children in the womb. Infanticide, what about, it's just a thin layer of flesh that separates. Why wouldn't we kill them outside of the womb? And what about infanticide? He says, well, morally, I don't know what he means when he uses the word morally, but he's using it. Morally, strictly morally, he's strict in his morals, in fact. Morally, strictly morally, I can see no objection to that at all. I would be in favor of infanticide up to 2 years of age. If human beings under 2 years of age are inconvenient for the purposes of their parents, their community, well, yeah, it's just a matter of evolutionary biology. Let's end them. So he says this, kind of drawing his worldview to a conclusion. In a universe of blind physical forces and genetic replication, well, that's how he defines the universe in totality, okay? Some people are going to get hurt. Children under 2 years of age, for example. Other people are going to get lucky. I guess that would be you and me, because here we are sharing this moment together, and you won't find any rhyme or reason in it or any justice. There's no such thing. Just get over it. Human beings are of no greater significance than a pig. Well, the universe, he says, that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. If you're wondering why life feels meaningless at times, Dawkins says, well, that's because it is meaningless. But here's the thing. There is that existential itch that for some reason we can't shake, there is this constant sense that, hey, wait a minute, even if you subscribe to Dawkins' worldview, you probably are a little uncomfortable with him saying these kinds of things out loud on the internet. Why? Because you may believe intellectually in a series of logical deductions, A, B, C. You may have moved through a process of thinking. You may believe with your intellect that life has no meaning. But it is impossible to live your life as if it had no meaning. You can read the faith tenets of Dawkins and Gould, and you can take on board intellectually their complete erasing of any meaning or significance to life whatsoever. And the moment, having taken that on board, you see a grown man hurting a child, something will happen inside of you. A switch will flip. A sense of justice, maybe even a legit rage. You may take that worldview on board and get on a public subway and see somebody push an old woman out of the way when he is a young man to take the seat, and you'll feel like something wrong has happened in the universe. Or you may even go outside for a walk in Los Angeles and have your neighbors shout out the window, "Go home!" and shame you into isolation in this time of coronavirus pandemic, when in fact people are sensing that we ought to do, what are they calling it? The right thing. And isolate ourselves socially so that somebody downstream from us who's vulnerable doesn't get seriously ill and die. So we can't actually, in real life, we can't live out the implications of secular existentialism. We sense somewhere in us that life does have meaning. Now, why is it that we're even going through the psychological and intellectual and emotional gymnastics of trying to evade the meaning of life? Well, The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. By the way, this book was winner of the Pulitzer Prize posthumous. After he died, he won a prize for this book because it's so remarkable. I've read it twice. This book is, bar none, probably the best history of psychology, psychotherapy, and existentialism ever written. I don't know, I haven't read all of them. I've read a lot of them. This book is at the top of my list. It's astounding, sentence by sentence, the level of clarity that he achieves. Now, one of the things that he faces us with is this. He's building here, by the way, on the thinking of Kierkegaard and other existential philosophers when he says, we tend, as human beings, to be afraid of any knowledge that could cause us to despise ourselves or to make us feel inferior, weak, worthless, evil, or shameful. Do you see what he's saying here? He's saying, listen, there's something going on inside of us where if any knowledge encroaches upon our minds that would cause us to think badly of ourselves, we go into hyper self-preservation mode, and we come up with ways and means to not take that uncomfortable knowledge on board. This is clearly evident in Genesis chapter 3, where Adam and Eve, having taken shame into their psychological makeup, now find an impulse within themselves to hide from God and to come up with compensation mechanisms so as not to be seen as they are. That's Genesis chapter 3. Well, Becker goes on and he speaks with a level of clarity that will be uncomfortable for you and me, but it's a discomfort we need to bear if we're going to grow as human beings. He says, we protect ourselves and our ideal image of ourselves by repression and similar defenses, which are essentially techniques by which we avoid becoming conscious of unpleasant or dangerous truths. Well, this is like basically commentary on the entire dynamic that occurs in John chapter 8 between Jesus and the religious leaders, where he is confronting them with the truth that their religion has been reduced to a vacancy of meaning, with the rituals on the surface pretending to have meaning. He has previously called them snakes, vipers, and hypocrites, a word that means fakes or pretenders or actors. And then Jesus comes along in John chapter 8 and he says, listen, what you need is the truth, but you won't take it on board. You're constantly pushing back on reality because if you were to believe what I'm telling you, you would have to face yourself and the bankruptcy of your legal, ritualistic system of religion without meaning. Well, Becker comes along, he says, listen, it's universal. Human beings universally are in this pushback mode all the time. Jesus comes along and he says, listen, here's the remedy. Chapter 8 of John, verse 32, you shall know the truth and the truth will set you free. There's only liberation in facing reality about God, about ourselves in contrast to God, and then to merge our identities with his and to become who we're meant to be. That's John chapter 8. Now, Becker goes on and he says, men, by which he means human beings, man lives by lying to himself and about his world. By lives, he means that's how we survive. That's how we kick it in this world. That's how we get through. That's how we keep on keeping on. The only way we survive is by lying to ourselves about ourselves, propping up our favored, constructed image of ourselves rather than coming clean with God and with ourselves and with our loved ones. Man survives by lying to himself. And here, Becker is giving commentary unwittingly on Romans chapter 3, where the Apostle Paul comes along and says that human beings universally are dishonest. Human beings universally, he says, all of us are liars, Paul says. Now, he's not talking about the kind of lies that we tell of the surface kind, like giving the wrong answer on a tax return document or something. He's not talking about somebody saying, hey, how do I look in this dress? And you say, well, you look great, when in fact you don't believe it. He's talking rather about a fundamental dishonesty in human experience. The Apostle Paul is saying in Romans 3 that we are universally dishonest with ourselves, about who and what we are. Well, Becker goes on and he describes this as a necessary and basic dishonesty about oneself. Now, by necessary, he means necessary for survival, not necessary in the ultimate sense that you need it in order to be full and complete as a human being. Because as we're going to discover, the fact is, the universal delusion regarding ourselves is not necessary. In fact, it gives way in the light of a love that transcends our deluded sense of ourselves. So Becker says, listen, all of us were liars, and we're constantly in the process of fabricating narratives and personas of ourselves that we project to others in order to not face the realities of our situation. So we could say it this way. We as human beings, this is me summarizing this particular part of Becker's work. We as human beings are possessed by a fundamental dishonesty. This is Paul in Romans chapter 3. Possessed by a fundamental dishonesty. Now, we are currently faced with a crisis of worldwide proportions. And we're being told that we need to socially distance ourselves from one another. And that social distancing is, to say the least, a pain in the neck for many aspects of life. I mean, it is amplifying, for many of us, the existential itch. It is magnifying our sense of self-awareness. We're being driven into silence and solitude and seclusion. It's kind of a forced Sabbath, if you will, where we find ourselves in a situation where we're alone, in a sense. Now, social distancing that we're being prompted toward, I'm going to suggest to you, is also medicine for our souls. It is unwanted medicine, and it is medicine coming to us in a way we would rather it not come to us. To be sure, this coronavirus is bad to the bone. It is horrible. It is not something that we should in any way justify or try to give significance to. Many people are hurting. Many people are dying. And yet, the fact is, you and I, we find ourselves in a situation right now where being alone, being silent, being in solitude can be medicine for our souls. I recently had a conversation with a friend of mine, Kevin Alushila. He is the beatboxer and world-famous cellist. He is the 3-time Grammy Award-winning artist with his vocal group, Pentatonics. We had a conversation. It was over an hour. You can listen to the whole conversation if you'd like to at the page you're watching this presentation on, our YouTube page for Storyline Church. But listen. There's a part of this conversation where I asked Kevin, what about this social distancing idea? And I want you to listen in for just about 3 minutes to what Kevin had to say about social
this coronavirus,
distancing.
Man, it has us all, in a sense, alone. It has us, there you are sitting in a room by yourself. I'm sure that Leah's nearby, but so we're socially isolated. How are you navigating the creative process while being separated from people?
For sure. And that's such an important question, because I think first thing I want to say is that just because we're physically distancing ourselves doesn't mean we're social distancing ourselves. I want to make
that's a good distinction.
I want to be a friend of mine talked to me about this. His name is Daniel Ramamorthy. He was actually my wedding. I am Dan Ram. And he was like, just because we're physically distancing ourselves does not at all mean that we're social distancing. In fact, we have to socially enhance. We have to. Utilizing all of these tools that we have, even though we're not in a physical space where sometimes that's where you get your creative energy from.
Yeah.
You can still utilize tools like we're using right now, Zoom, social media, email, phone calls, to still continue that social enhancing, which I feel like is one of the bedrocks of how we create society, right? And this is just a very new way, and it's a very new way within the years that this human civilization has been around. This has been a very different way of how we do it, but it's still a tool that we can use. So I think the social enhancing that we've definitely been using is tools like this. I mean, I've told you about this. I started this kind of a Bible study in Los Angeles called Imagine LA. And for our community, we've been using Zoom to connect with our members, especially these people who are dreamers, who are creatives, who are young professionals trying to navigate faith in Los Angeles, right? That you can still be creative in this time. It just requires you to be that much more intentional. So one of the ways I know I've been doing it, is that every day I still have sessions with people, but it's over FaceTime. The cool thing about FaceTime is that the audio is actually really superior, I personally think, than phone lines. And so I can hear really well what the producer is doing in the other room. And because I have my own setup of recording, as I'm listening to what's going on, I can actually record stuff here, send that over to them, the files via WeTransfer, whatever file sharing app you would use. And so we'll be able to converse like that. And it's actually been pretty good. And songwriters were still able to feel the energy when we're writing lyrics depending on the melodies and stuff. So I've actually been doing sessions every single day, and it's been really, really
Wow.
productive.
Good for you, man. I'm glad you're staying connected. So say what was that articulation? It was so we're physically distancing, but not socially distancing.
Exactly. I don't like the word social distancing because
it's not a good idea, is it?
No, that's not what we're doing.
I mean, right now we're socially connected. Right exactly. Now, this moment, yeah.
Exactly, we're socially connected. I still feel your energy, albeit, of course, I like being with you in person, Ty, because you are the man. So.
Yeah, I love being with you in person because those muscles, man, inspire me to work out. As soon as I grab hold of your hunky body and feel those muscles, I'm like, come on, Ty, come on. You inspired me.
But exactly. We're social enhancing right now. We are not social distancing ourselves. We are physically distancing because of
that's right.
Well, according to Kevin Alushila, we're physically distancing, but not socially distancing. I love that distinction. This is a distinction that is so vital to make right now because the fact is, as we're going into a kind of necessary self-quarantining, separating ourselves from society and from large groups of people. At the same time, this is an opportunity to actually draw close to those whom we love that are in our social circles and we can have contact with in small groups. But even more than that, even those we're physically separated from, we have an opportunity to reach out with other forms of communication, to stay in touch and to build relationships. Now, the existential movement says that really we as human beings, when we're faced with this kind of crisis like the coronavirus pandemic, that this is really of no significance whatsoever because life has no significance whatsoever. And yet, when we find ourselves in solitude and isolation, the existential itch is magnified, and we find that, in fact, when we are alone, our thoughts begin to move in the direction of meaning and significance, wondering, who am I? What's my life about? Let me reassess. What am I going to do once this thing lifts? And being in close proximity to people, as much as we love them, also amplifies the existential itch because close proximity to people causes us to come face to face with things in ourselves that we are accustomed to not facing. But in close proximity, we have to. Now, that branch of existential philosophy that says that life does have significance is building on the biblical storyline. Now, in the biblical narrative, we have something extremely important and fascinating taking place, as my slides won't switch. In the Old Testament, we have a key word that, well, it's not just a key word. This word is head and shoulders above every other word in the Old Testament. In fact, the Hebrew word hesed is the most frequently used word to describe the identity of God, the character of God in the entire Old Testament canon. 260 times plus. There's not even a close second. This is the word, everybody. This is the word that defines who God is. Now, this word in the English is sometimes translated as mercy. Sometimes it's translated as unfailing love. Sometimes it is translated as faithful love. I was talking to an Old Testament scholar one time, and I said, hey, what's with this word hesed? What does it mean? He said, you'll have to sit down for that because the word hesed, I don't suppose you could give any word or sentence that would approximate the richness of this word. It is so full of meaning. He said you would have to come up with a word for every letter of the alphabet, 26 words to even begin to, now he was speaking with exaggeration for effect, but I came up with 26 words that in fact are inherent in the word hesed. Words like constancy, reliability, changeless. words like faithful, loyal, words like covenant, words that give the sense that God is the kind of God who exists himself in an existential reality. God's very existence is defined by a constant, faithful, loyal love for all others above and before himself. When we come to the New Testament, the word that is used more frequently than any other to define the character of God is the word agape. Now, agape is the parallel Greek word to the Hebrew word hesed. Agape, again, means love that is unconditional, love that is not conditional upon whatever's happening in the object of this love. In other words, agape comes along in the New Testament and says, listen, there's nothing you can do to alter God's heart, mind, posture towards you. There's nothing you can do to make God love you more than he already does because he already loves you with all his love. There's nothing you can do to cause God to back off or to stop pursuing you or to cease loving you. God's love is hesed love. It's faithful. It's agape love. It's changeless. The existential meaning of human life is described in one of my favorite Bible verses in the NIV version here is important. Proverbs 19:22 says, what a person desires is unfailing love. This is an existential statement. This is a statement about the existential need, longing, yearning, desire, itch that exists in every human soul. There's something you want more than anything else. There's something I want more than anything else. And what you want and what I want is love of a particular quality. Love that is unfailing. Not the shallow, silly, sentimental love that comes and goes with human passion, but an unfailing love of principle, a concrete love. That's what you need. That's what you long for more than anything else. Jeremiah comes along and he literally quotes God. He hears God saying something to him and he says, yes, I have loved you. This is God speaking with an everlasting love. That's the word hesed, everlasting love. Therefore, with loving kindness, I have drawn you. All of us are experiencing a kind of gravitational pull constantly upon our hearts, our minds, our lives. The reason we have a sense of significance and meaning is because our lives are of significance and meaning. The reason why we have the existential itch is because that itch can be relieved by the touch of God's love upon our souls. It is no phantom itch. The thing is you do want something, as do I, and every person you know. You want something, but your wanter is broken. Your wanter. Now, you probably never heard of your wanter, but you have one. You have a wanter. You are equipped with a wanter, and your wanter is broken. You think you want things that in fact you don't want, and this is evident by the fact that oftentimes when you get what you want, you say to yourself, whoa, I don't feel any different. I don't want this. How can I get rid of this now? Your wanter is broken. C.S. Lewis says that the brokenness of our wanter is described as an ever-increasing craving for an ever-diminishing pleasure. This is what the Bible calls sin or transgression or iniquity. It's not an arbitrary idea. It's an existential idea. It's an idea that has to do with human existence. Human beings are made for something. It's made for something more than pursuing an ever-increasing desire for an ever-diminishing pleasure. There's something more, and it's always reaching into us. Psalm 42, verse 6, one of the most beautiful pieces of poetry you will ever read. Oh my God, my soul is cast down within me, therefore I will remember you. Look what's happening here. When we're faced with crisis like the coronavirus, we find ourselves in trouble. And when we find ourselves cast down, something triggers inside of us. And it's happening right now. I'm talking to people in all kinds of ways other than being in their physical presence, communicating with people. They're communicating with me and saying, man, I really need the Lord. I need God. People are reaching out right now for Jesus in ways that they haven't before. Why? Because the trouble in the world triggers a sense that, wow, life must mean something more than this. But then look at verse 7. Deep calls unto deep at the noise of your waterfalls. All your waves and billows have gone over me. Poetically, what David is saying here is that when I encounter the beautiful things of life, not just like in the previous verse, the troubles of life, and then I call out for God, but when I encounter the beautiful things of life, a waterfall, deep calls unto deep. The deepest realities of life are triggered when I encounter both trouble and beauty. The depths of God's love calls out to the depths of my need for his love. And then this in verse 8, the Lord will command his loving kindness. Take a guess what word that is. That's hesed. That's the word that defines who God is. The Lord will command his hesed, his loving kindness in the daytime, and in the night his song shall be with me, a prayer to the God of my life, the God of my life, the God who gives my life significance and meaning. Notice that David says, in the night when I'm all alone, in the midst of my trouble, there's a song in my heart. And that song in my heart is his song. It's his song. When I'm singing to God with longing desire, in my very song of love to him, he is inspiring that song so that it is also his song of love to me. As I articulate my adoration of him, through that adoration, he is reciprocating and saying, I love you too. I long for you too. I desire you too. Deep calls unto deep at the noise of his waterfalls. The 19th century seer, prophet girl, Ellen White, put forth a lot of effort to come up with language to approximate the meaning of God's love. I've collected a lot of her statements regarding God's love, but here are the ones I want to highlight this morning. Reaching for language, she describes God's love as changeless love. And get this, God's love is not only changeless, she says God's love is unparalleled. Unparalleled. There's nothing that you can compare it to. His love is matchless. It is without compare. There is matchless love in the heart of God. It is self-sacrificing love, and Calvary demonstrates that. The death of Jesus on the cross demonstrates that God's love is of a self-sacrificing quality. He would rather die forever than to live without you and me. His love is infinite love. It doesn't have any ceiling or floor or walls. It's infinite. And it is incomprehensible love. And that means we will have the privilege of probing it our entire life long and for all eternity, to probe and to peel back the layers of God's love, because God's changeless, unparalleled, matchless, self-sacrificing, infinite, and incomprehensible love is the scratch for the existential itch that all of us are experiencing. The fact is, you guys, everything that you are meant to be is perfectly at home with who He is. You're made for fellowship with the God of the universe. He crafted your intellect, your emotions, even your biology for seamless intersection with Him. God loves you. If that sounds trite or shallow to your ears, I would invite you to take the time to explore and to probe the biblical narrative of God's love and find that it is anything but trite. It is anything but shallow. God's love is without parallel. It is without compare in everything that this world has to offer. And His love is the satisfaction for the existential itch that all of us are feeling, and with magnified, amplified sense of need at this time of social isolating. I want to invite you to take the time to probe the depths of God's love for you and to fall more deeply in love with Him yourself.
There's a peace I've come to know, though my heart and flesh may fail. There's an anchor for my soul. I can say it is well. Jesus has overcome, and the grave is overwhelmed. The victory is won. He is risen from the dead, and I will rise when He calls my name. No more sorrow, no more pain. I will rise on eagle's wings before my God, fall on my knees and rise. I will rise. There's a day that's drawing near, when this darkness seems to lie and the shadows disappear, and my faith shall be my eyes. Jesus is overcome, and the grave is overwhelmed. The victory is won. He is risen from the dead, and I will rise when He calls my name. No more sorrow, no more pain. I will rise on eagle's wings before my God, fall on my knees and rise. I will rise, and I hear the voice of many angels sing, worthy is the Lamb. And I hear the cry of every longing heart, worthy is the Lamb. And I hear the voice of many angels sing, worthy is the Lamb. And I hear the cry of every longing heart, worthy is the Lamb, worthy No more sorrow, no more pain. I will rise on eagle's wings before my God, fall on my knees and rise. I will rise. I will rise.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Allie. Well, hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this Storyline live stream. I want you to know that we're going to be doing this again next Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific time here in the United States. Wherever you are in the world, put it in your calendar. We'd love for you to join us again and again. And as you are fully aware, as we are engaged in this time of physical distancing for the good of our communities, that means that a lot of churches, probably all churches, are pretty much closed down at this time. Storyline is no exception. Those of you who are local storyliners who are watching from home, we just want to encourage you to continue to stand in solidarity with us and to meet the financial obligations and needs of Storyline Church. You can give any amount that you would like to give by simply texting to the number on the screen, 84321, 84321. You can text to that number and give any amount. And I want to appeal to you, whoever you are, wherever you are, where your church is, your local church is closed down, shut down right now, and you're at home. I want to encourage you to be faithful in your giving to your local church. The needs are real there. Do everything you can to stay plugged in socially with the people around you, even though you have to be physically distant at this time. Call somebody, text somebody, write an email, send a postcard, do something, communicate, and stay plugged in with your local church community and be faithful in your ongoing financial support of that local church. Again, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again next week, same time, Saturday, 11 a.m. Pacific time. Hey, thanks so much for watching. We hope that message was a blessing to you. God's Word is powerful. It penetrates into our minds, into our hearts, and brings about transformation in every aspect of our lives. Listen, we don't want you to miss any content, so again, we want to encourage you to click on subscribe and track with the content that's going to be coming out week after week. And if you'd like to partner with us in this global ministry of taking the gospel of Christ to the whole world, we want to invite you to become a partner in this ministry. Click Give and join with us.